Virtualization. Hi everyone, and welcome to my presentation on virtualization. This is a topic that is very important to me in my professional life, and it is something that I feel the general public should have a better grasp on. My name is Trevor, and I've had 17 years of experience in the IT and networking fields. So yes, if the first thing that popped into your head was nerd, you're pretty correct. And my wife would totally agree with you. I am a nerd who's had a passion for computers and the advancement of technology for most of my life. Everything from my hobbies to my professional life and the focus of my studies here at Divine University are a tribute to that passion. Virtualization is essentially interesting me because I like the opportunity that the technology can give, not only to people in my field, but to everyone in every field of study and work. From server rooms to classrooms, from grocery stores to corporate companies, everyone can benefit from virtualization, and this can be even truer than if everyone knew a little bit more about it. Of course, I could probably discuss the topic for hours, but I only have a few minutes, so we're going to hit the high points. First, I want to talk about what virtualization actually is. I'm going to break it down into layman's terms to give you a better understanding of the subject I will be talking about today. Second, I'm going to give you a little more background on the subject. After all, what better way to understand something than to start at the foundations? Next, we're going to walk down an interesting path of virtualization has taken since it was developed to the center stage focus of today's society. And speaking of today's society, we cannot cover current events without discussing the biggest event in our current history. Please ignore the oxymoron in the room. COVID. COVID has turned all ways of living inside out, and I think a lot of people would find it interesting to know just how virtualization has helped. Finally, we think about what I think virtualization will look like in the future and how I believe it will be a brighter future because of this amazing piece of technology. Virtualization. What is it? Well, the most straightforward definition I can give is a term applied to servers, storage, communication, and networking equipment that do not have a physical presence. Basically, you cannot reach out and touch the hardware because there is none. Well, at least not how or where you'd expect it to be. Virtualization can be utilized almost anywhere, from a home PC to a network server to a small business server, even networking equipment like switches and routers to full-size data centers. If you ever used a computer, and I'm talking about have you ever accessed the internet, a website? What about an online application, online storage, the cloud? If you answer yes to any of these, you've accessed a virtual machine or virtual hardware in some way. It is all around us, especially with the effects of COVID, but more on that coming. Now let us look at the history of virtualization. Like most technologies we have today, virtualization was rooted back in the 1960s, when the Cold War and the Great Space Race dominated headlines and news broadcasts on the frequent, if not regular basis. The U.S. at the time was racing the Soviet Union to make sure that they had the best of the best. So mainframe manufacturers were being pushed to develop new and better ways to improve computers and networking, which was barely a term in that time. It was not long before virtualization was born to the proud parent of IBM. IBM can of course take most of the credit for inventing this new technology, but the general public did not really begin seeing the benefits of virtualization until the 1990s when a company called VMware invented virtualization for the x86 platform, the early generation processors. Now, I think anyone who has ever been a parent can agree that just because you have and raise a child, that does not mean that you have control of what that child becomes in 10, 20, or 30, or 50 years even. Well, the same can be said for technology. So did virtualization go on to become what companies like IBM and VMware intended? A good example of how virtualization was used is some of its early days of Windows terminal servers. a technology that allowed companies to supply low-cost terminals instead of full PCs to their employees. While lowering the financial cost to the company, they allowed for easier access to necessary data. Additionally, the virtualization gave more control in restricting access to unnecessary data. At this time, we begin seeing some of the first levels of remote access, which aided in the maintenance and security. Later down the road, and closer to present, we see much of the same, but on a larger scale. The demand for hardware has drastically decreased over recent years due to much lower costs and higher benefits of more advanced software. Here come fruit for thought. COVID took a big hit on our economy and pushed a lot of companies completely out of business. Imagine if, when employees started working from home, instead of supplying laptops and remote access for the online servers, companies had to supply thousands of dollars in equipment to each employee who had to move their offices to their homes. Just think of that. Lastly, of course, virtualization allows for much easier management and maintenance of the systems. Now, this is a topic that I am sure we are all done talking about, and I feel that we cannot talk about the necessity of virtualization without covering it a small bit at least. After all, COVID changed the ways many of us see the world, and it changed the way we work, learn, work out, go to the doctor, and even spend time with our families. I briefly touched on the increased financial impact COVID could have had on businesses without virtualization a moment ago. But what about other issues? There have been reports of increased cases of depression and anxiety for kids and adults when the shutdowns began trapping people in their homes. I know for one, I hate to think about is how badly it would have gotten if the tools that allowed us to still work and go to school had not been accessible. Imagine if Zoom and Skype calls are no comparison to true personal interaction. But isn't it still better than no interaction at all? Now we have talked about the changes and advancements that have come with virtualization over the last 50 to 60 years. So where do we think it all will be in another 50 to 60 years? I mean, even today, virtualization has increased security and system availability. Applications like Remote Access is installed on every Windows 10 PC and is a free download from the Google Play Store, the Apple Store, and cloud computing have extended the security environments. The latter is helping to maintain the confidentiality of the data such as your medical records, your employment data, and other business documents. COVID has made a lot of businesses and companies realize how unnecessary on-site equipment and operations really are, and how cost-effective the alternatives can be in the long term. I believe that moving forward, we are going to see a lot more virtualization. A lot of us talk about wanting to go back to the way things were before COVID, but I honestly don't know that that is an option. A Pandora's box of sorts has been opened, and I think that we are going to be, well, I think we're going to be able to close it. Now, will that be good or bad? We're going to have to wait for the future to see that. So, as we wrap this up, let us hit some of the highest of these high points of virtualization. Today, we talked about the roller coaster ride of virtualization. It took this technology almost half a century to reach its peak, but that was 30 years ago, and I only see things getting more interesting. COVID-19 turned our world on its head and caused us to rethink and rework many of the things we do in our lives. We may not realize it, but virtualization has helped us through one of the hardest years in human history. Finally, we talked about the future of virtualization. Of course, that is all the guesswork. All I can say is that I just hope that we don't wind up in the case of Terminator on our hands. Sorry, I had to throw in at least one movie reference. Y'all have a good night, and thanks for listening.